Hello, Agape Church and friends. Welcome in to episode number 109 of the Building Up podcast. I am David. Thank you guys for being with us this week. The Building Up podcast is a ministry for the people of our church that we record in order to try and help you to grow spiritually as we look at passages of Scripture or address questions about faith and living out our faith in the culture. By the way, if you have any questions that you would like for us to address on the podcast, we still love to get those. And so you can email us using the email address at the end of the outro, or if you have my personal contact information, you can always just text those to me. As soon as we're done with the current series that we're in here on the podcast, we would love to address those and get back into answering some of those questions, as well as looking at biblical passages related to growing up and maturing in our faith. Right now, though, we're doing a series on Proverbs. So we've been going through the wise sayings of the book of Proverbs, and we have arrived at chapter 27. And so I hope you've had a chance to read that, or you will take time to read that at some point, and that this podcast will be a help to you as you walk through this chapter. So again, like I said on the last episode of the podcast, we're not really going to look at any big themes in this chapter. We're just going to take a look at some of these individual proverbs that really stood out to me as I was walking through or reading through the chapter. And I hope that maybe some of these are the same ones that stood out to you, but perhaps there are others. And again, if there's a particular proverb you would like to talk about, you'd like to share some thoughts on, or even ask a question about, use that same contact info I was just talking about and get those over to me, and I'd love to address them. Chapter 27, let's start with verse 2 in chapter 27, which says, "It is wisdom. Let another praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips." So here the proverb says, it is wisdom to not brag about yourself. It is wisdom to not praise yourself for your accomplishments or the things that you have done. If someone's going to brag about you, if someone's going to praise you, let it be others, either a stranger or someone that's in your life. Let it not come from your own lips. Now, in just a moment, we're going to see a verse that's going to tell us that how we handle praise when we receive it says a lot about ourselves. So we'll look at that in just a moment in verse 21. But I think this is just a verse that, we all have that tendency in us. I would say we all struggle with wanting recognition to some degree or another. For the most part, we struggle with wanting to receive recognition for what we've done, or at least we struggle when we don't get that recognition, right? So it may not necessarily be that we're wanting a lot of people to give us accolades. For some of us, that is our desire. But on the other hand, we just struggle when we don't get it, when we do things that go unrecognized, that don't get pointed out, or that, maybe we sacrifice something, or we spend some time and energy in helping someone, and then maybe that person shuns us, or maybe that person treats us badly. And so our immediate thought is, didn't you see what I did for you, right? And so we want that recognition for what we did. We want that acknowledgement. And Proverbs is just essentially saying it's not wise to ask for that. It's not wise to point to yourself. Just leave that for others to do. And that can be very hard, but it is wisdom. I think about the New Testament passages that tell us that essentially we should let our focus be on others and serving other people. And that when we do that, what we are displaying to God is a heart that trusts God to recognize us and honor us and bless us as He sees fit. We don't work for our own praise. We don't work for our own recognition, but we work for others. And we trust that God will give us what we are due, or what He wants us to have when He wants us to have it. And so I think the way the biblical passage puts it is that God will lift you up in due time. That if you humble yourself and you serve others, that God will lift you up. He will honor you when he deems that to be appropriate. And it's a sign of trust for us to leave that to God, to serve and love and help and invest and work and let God be in charge of the recognition that we receive from it. So don't brag about yourself. Don't praise about yourself. That is not the path of wisdom. And that can be very hard to do. It can be hard, especially when we don't feel like we are valued. But wisdom is to leave that to the Lord. I think that's what Proverbs is pointing us to. All right, verse 5 and 6, I think, are very important Proverbs here in chapter 27. Verse 5, better is open rebuke than a hidden love. And verse 6, faithful are the wounds of a friend, while profuse are the kisses of an enemy. So verse 5 is really addressing what we've seen a lot in Proverbs, and that is that correction is helpful. All right, it's never fun. You don't wake up and think, I really want a good rebuke today. I really want someone to correct me today. But for the most part, I think we're talking about correction. We're not talking about for petty things or small things, but actually correcting where we are thinking foolishly or acting foolishly or speaking foolishly, and someone comes alongside of us and says, you know what, I really think you should consider this. I really think you need to listen and consider your mindset or how you're behaving. I think that's the kind of rebuke or correction that Proverbs has in mind. And while that is not enjoyable to our flesh, it is very good for our soul. And we need those people in our life who have love and care and compassion for us enough to make those corrections. And we need to be wise and humble enough to receive them when they do make those corrections. And so better is open rebuke. It's better for someone who loves you enough to come to you and say those things than someone who loves you but just keeps that love hidden because they never say anything to you at all. Because while they may care for you, they never show that care because they don't really want to come and address anything that they see in your life that is incorrect. Now, it may be because you're a person who doesn't receive correction well. We've talked about that on previous episodes. And so because we don't receive correction well, people are a little afraid to address us. So what we need to know is it is wise to have people in our life who will give us that correction when needed, and it is wise for us to receive it in a good way. And it is better for them to come to us and rebuke us if needed than to keep their love hidden by just being silent. And that rolls us right into verse 6. That says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Someone who is truly your friend, who really loves you, they may wound you at times. And the type of wounding that we're talking about is wounding your flesh through correction. They may tell you something, not that you want to hear, but that you need to hear. And it may be hurtful or painful to your natural man. But what Proverbs is saying is, faithful are those wounds. Because it takes a lot for someone to come and do that. It takes a lot for someone to be willing to reach out and step into your life and maybe take that risk of correction so that you can grow in wisdom. So you can trust that person. You can trust them. You can trust that they are trying to faithfully discharge their responsibility as a friend. And in wisdom and godly wisdom, they're faithfully discharging their responsibility as a godly servant, where the Bible tells us to do these things in order to help one another. I think it's Hebrews that says, exhort one another every day so that we're not hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Other New Testament passages tell us that it is good and right to turn a brother or sister or a sinner back from their ways, and you're actually helping them avoid a lot of harm. Enemies, they give you a lot of compliments. They give you a lot of flattery. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Someone who doesn't really care about your soul, they don't really care about your life, they're not going to tell you anything that's hard. They're not going to tell you anything that is correcting you. They're always going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to encourage you in your foolishness, much like we were talking about in chapter 26 on the last episode. They're going to honor you even if you're being foolish. I think here of the enemy of God. I think of Satan here and his kingdom that flatters and approves of sin, who would never correct or rebuke someone who is doing what is wrong, but would always flatter them and give them those profuse kisses, not because they really care about you, but because in the end they want your destruction. Where God and the members of his family, we have this way in which we live with each other where out of our concern and correction and love, out of our concern and our love for one another, we bring correction sometimes. And it may hurt, but we can trust those wounds from a friend. We can trust that God is at work in those. And it is wise to have those kind of people in your life and to listen to them. All right, let's keep going. I have to point out verse 14 because, just because I really love verse 14, but it says, whoever blesses his neighbor with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, will be counted as cursing. Yes. So essentially, this is for all you morning people who get up and you're just cheerful in the morning and you want to bless everybody around you and you got a big smile on your face and you want to be loud and you want to be friendly. And you know what? It's really just cursing to everyone who's around you who's not a morning person. I am just being sarcastic. That is really not what I think that proverb is telling us, although I just find it funny every time I read it, because we do know that to be true, right? If, a lot of us will wake up in the morning, we want our coffee, we want to be left alone. We're not ready for this, loud, friendly welcome by someone else. We don't want people knocking on our door at 8 o'clock in the morning. We're not ready for that. But I actually think what this proverb is pointing us to is just be tactful, right? Part of being tactful is not just knowing the right message to give someone, but the right time, right? And so I think what Proverbs is saying is that, hey, look, being loud and friendly, blessing your neighbor in a loud voice, that's a good thing to do, but you should time it right. Knowing when to do something is just as important as knowing what to do or what to say. I think Proverbs has pointed us to that before, is that a good message at the right time that's wisdom. And so be tactful, even in delivering those really friendly well wishes to your neighbor. All right, I definitely want to cover verse 21, but it comes in the context of some other verses. Let's look at verse 19. As in water, face reflects face, so the heart of a man reflects the man. So you can see what you look like physically by looking in a mirror or looking at your reflection in the water. How do you know what a person is really about, though? How do you know their nature? And that is their heart. Their heart reflects who they really are inside. Now, Proverbs has told us only God can truly see a man's heart. So we have to remember that. But Proverbs has also shown us, as other passages and other scripture throughout the Bible, that your heart is revealed by what is produced from you. So by what you do and by what you say, those are all things your life produces that reveals your heart. So who you really are is based on your heart, which is revealed in the things that you do and the things that you say. That leads into verse 21. The crucible is for silver, and the furnace is for gold, and a man is tested by his praise. Man, what an incredible proverb there. Of course, precious metals are tested by fire, right? And so they're tested by fire so that the impurities can come out in them and be removed. Well, God tests men by praise. How do you respond when someone gives you praise? What is really in you? This goes back to that very the second verse in the chapters, let another praise you, not your own mouth. But what happens when someone praises you? How do you respond to that? Does it Does it, blow up your ego, and does it make you proud? And do you really take that in and think that you're really, really, really highly of yourself? Or when you're praised, does it cause you to think about how good God is and what God has done in your life? Because you know that anything good in you comes from Him, not from yourself. When you get praise, it is a testing of what's really in your heart. And I think that's ultra important. I don't know how much it means about like exactly how you respond to praise necessarily, like what you say back to someone who praises you. But I do think it is pointing at that inner person, who you are in your heart, and what praise does for you and what praise does to you. If praise makes you love yourself more and makes you think highly of yourself, I think you're probably failing that test. But if praise causes you to love God more and to be more thankful for Him, and if praise causes you to want to spend more time with God so you can become someone who's more and more and more like Jesus and able to bless others, I think that is a better, more godly, more wise product of praise for the heart of someone who is humble. All right, I'm over time for this episode of the podcast. Thank you guys for being with us. I hope that's been helpful. We have 4 more chapters to go over the next few weeks. Hope you will join us for those on this podcast. Until then, grace and peace to your family. Thank you for listening to the Building Up Podcast, a ministry of Agape Church in Pinson, Alabama. If you have a question about today's podcast or would like to suggest a topic for the future, please email us, buildingup@agapepinson.com. To subscribe to this podcast, simply search for Building Up from Agape Church in your favorite podcast app. So fierce, he looked straight into me and said, "Son, I've given you victory. I can hear the sound